Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast.
Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast, a public works podcast of the nerds, by the nerds, and for the nerds. I am your host, Mark Culver. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to try and experiment within the experiment. I've been calling this podcast journey a bit of an experiment, and now we're going to shake up the format a little bit, a lot actually, and try something I'm calling the Nerds Unplugged. We're going to go completely off script, hopefully not completely off the rails, and see if we can have a little fun just talking about public works related items in the news, maybe recapping some of our recent episodes and getting some additional insight into public works. So joining me today are some public works nerds veterans and one newcomer. So first, our veterans, Deb Heiser, Engineering Director for the City of St. Louis Park. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We've got Mark Ray, who's been with us a couple of times. Mark Ray, Public Works Director for the City of Burnsville.
Good to be here.
And Michael Thompson, Public Works Director for the City of Plymouth.
Also great to be here.
And our newcomer and special guest, Richard McCoy, Public Works Director and City Engineer for the City of Robbinsdale. All of this in Minnesota, of course, because we are in Minnesota. All right. Enough of the scripted stuff. Welcome to the experiment, and let's have some fun. I'm going to start by just saying, first of all, congratulations to Mr. Ray for his recent shift to the City of Burnsville. You were at Crystal the last couple times we've heard from you, and now you've taken a new role at the City of Burnsville. Maybe just take a quick moment to talk about that.
Yeah, well, being, family in the area, I decided to try to head south to warm up a little bit, and so Burnsville seemed like a great fit.
You warmed up the whole state in the process.
Exactly. No, it's been a great time at Burnsville. It's about 2 months coming up here, being there, and it's been fun to get to know the staff, learn the city a little bit. It's always some nuances of having worked north of 394, all the Avenue Norths, and now it's south, and so just kind of some of the nuances with the names are just part of the fun of learning the city, learning the people, and just trying to make normal happen.
Cool. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing more about Burnsville here. So Deb, she has been a co-host with me. She's been on an episode. Anything new in your realm?
New in my realm, well, we had our City Engineers Association meeting.
Yep.
We just
Which
closed that up at noon today, and I was very honored to be elected to be the vice president. So I'll be moving into a new role. I was
honored to be elected in an unopposed election.
Oh, no. There was a write-in campaign. I'm sure Mickey Mouse might have won if there had been a couple more votes, but
actually, they look back and Mickey Mouse had a felony, so could not serve as president.
All right, sounds good.
Vice president. Yes.
But very successful concert. We'll talk about it later. I'm sorry to steal your thunder, but that's what's going on with us. Looking forward to a construction season that's coming up. Right?
Yeah,
could start tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for everybody, it's unseasonably warm in Minnesota right now. We had 51 degrees on Wednesday, which is unheard of. In January.
Just at St. Louis Park, I did see a street sweeper out today.
Taking advantage of it.
Here. So, yeah, it's, I'm not sure the last time streets were being swept on February 2nd.
Right.
Probably never.
Probably.
And Michael, welcome back. I wanted to say this. So Michael and Mark was the first episode of the Public Works Nerds podcast, and Michael was number 2. Now, if you look at the downloads, which is not publicly available, if you look at the downloads, Michael has 600 and some downloads, and Mark is quickly chasing him at 560 downloads. So it's a race. So get your friends, your family members to get those download numbers up even further. But there may be a prize at the end of season 2 with who's got the most downloads.
Did you make sure he didn't download it 400 times himself?
I can't see that level of detail.
Clear, there was no fine print. Thank you very much. I'd also like to point out it was the last episode of the first season 2.
He was.
Okay.
We're not counting that one for downloads.
So you are a veteran. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then our newcomer, Mr. Richard McCoy.
Howdy.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Now, we intentionally brought Richard in here because if you don't know Richard, and many of you do, but if you don't know Richard, he's a little saucy. And we thought, you know what better way to kick off this little unplugged episode and see what controversy we can create than invite Mr. McCoy here. So welcome. We expect great things from you.
Well, yeah, I'll tone my my language down a bit for public consumption.
Yeah. So just a little background for you, Richard. You've been with Robbinsdale for how long?
Just over 22 years.
Where were you before Robbinsdale?
Australia.
Yeah. You can hear it in the voice.
Yep.
And I think I want to talk a little bit about that if it comes, back to this. I think there's some interesting things about Australia. Actually, we talked about you. We mentioned your name in the last.
I saw that with Russ.
Yes,
yeah.
in episode 3 of season 2 here with Russ Mathis, we talked about how asset management is handled in Australia. So maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. But all right, so that's the introduction. Where do we go from here? What do we do now? Let's touch on
the conference. Let's just go. That's
all right.
That's raw. That's right there.
Right. Just take things
It's
over.
fresh.
We have the vice president
fresh.
here, everybody. I'm not sure where security is, but they might be watching.
They're triple secret security.
Right.
Yeah, so the City Engineers Conference just ended. It's Friday. We're recording this on the Friday afternoon of the conference. It's a 2.5 day conference, and I think Deb and I actually had an episode talking about City Engineers Association, and we've said that we think this is like the best conference around. It's great content, great people, great networking, all of that. Deb, as she so proudly declared, is the vice president. Will be serving as the vice president in 2024. Will be the president unless there's a successful write-in campaign in 2025. And then Michael, you are on the board right now as a past president. Will you or will you not be on the board in 2024?
I believe I will be. So I've been the past president for 2 years now because the presidents have taken jobs in the private sector. So we've had this continuous vacancy as president. So Justin Fimwright from Elk River, he has been second past president for a while. So we're just stuck in this loop. So it could be a lifetime appointment for all that I know.
Let's hope not.
Yeah,
What happens
let's hope not.
3 years of being the past president? Like, do you get a silver spoon or like a golden shovel?
We're gonna make him a T-shirt.
Yeah, I'll take whatever I can get.
Well, and I think that with the conference this year, we actually had 525 attendees.
Yeah.
Which is actually a record. I was talking to a previous past president from probably 15, 20 years ago. They used to only have about 300, 250 to 300 people attending the conference, and it's just grown. I think it's a testament to the content and the planning committee. Remember, the planning committee is made up of professionals from the private and public sector trying to find timely topics, and there were some really great topics on the conference this year. We had a PFAS, which was one of the episodes. We also had lead service lines, which is one of the episodes that has been on here. Forgive me, we were talking about technology with being able to do tree inventories using AI. That was really I think everybody was pretty impressed with that, being able to drive down the street and be able to scan for trees and see health and species just by taking pictures. Ross talked about his work with the pond, and that was another episode.
Another veteran and Nerds Nerd there.
Nerds Nerd, yeah. He did present 3 times.
He did in one day.
In one day. So
it just really stresses the quality of the content there, and we hope those people that are attending the conference become members, right? So
yes.
continue
right.
year round.
We're sending you a bill.
And we do get great feedback being on the planning committee.
Yeah.
This year we had George Hawkins as our keynote speaker to kick off on Wednesday morning. And so we try to get somebody technical. So he was the utility general manager for Washington, D.C. for a stretch.
Yeah.
And so he brought a lot of that technical knowledge with inspiration. And so what I think our membership gets out of it is, of course, they get their continuing education credits, but they also are inspired by professionals just like you or I. And so I think they appreciate hearing from people in the industry. And we're always keeping things fresh with the conference, and very glad to be part of that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the amazing things whenever I hear speakers from, out east or like Europe, where it's the time horizon is so much different, right? Like, we're talking our cities are built out 60s and beyond, roughly, where you have DC, Boston, they've been around for significantly longer and just
of years, yeah.
And they're built out, and so it's how do you work in that environment? It's always just fascinating to hear where you see those like you know, they open the road, all the underground buried stuff. It's like, how do you even get to whatever it is you're trying to fixing it? And then just the challenge that they have are always like fascinating to hear and really stress the importance of right-of-way management.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you hear the keynote speaker was talking about some of the water infrastructure installed back around the Civil War time. And, you know, for me working at Plymouth, you know, for us, it's like 1950s and 60s is a long time ago. And so it just, I think having outside speakers just gives everybody a different point of view and sometimes makes you appreciate what you do have because somebody always has it a lot worse.
Yep. So, and one of the other sessions we had, Richard, you had a session talking about your new water treatment plant, award-winning.
Award-winning.
2 awards now.
Yep.
Are you going to go after a national award with that or anything?
Of course.
Of course.
Yep.
Of course. So maybe talk a little bit about your, I mean, we're not going to spend a whole, hour on it, but, spend a couple minutes talking about your water treatment plant. What are you so proud about? What's so special about your new water treatment plant?
We are really proud of the water treatment plant. Now for the first time, Robbinsdale is softening its water. If you didn't know, Robbinsdale water beforehand was bloody awful. So
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, so to have the city council and really the community support building a softening plant is extremely brilliant, and Robbinsdale's not a big city by any means, and for a city that size to invest, in the order of $40 million on the water treatment plant plus a new water tower plus some new wells, that's pretty phenomenal stuff.
Remind me again what the population is of Robbinsdale.
Well, we're just hitting on 15,000.
It is a big investment.
And it's all well water.
It's all well water, yep.
I think the big thing there, right, is we're just talking about, water infrastructure being put in the Civil War. And you think about this $40 million investment by the City of Robbinsdale that will literally carry on for generations who won't remember, that'll just be normal for them.
It will be.
Whereas in this transition time,
there's a bit of turmoil.
People, well, it's stress, it's money, and it's change.
Yeah. I sat in and watched the presentation that Richard did with his consulting team. And what I found fascinating was the construction of it and how you constructed it to make sure it was easily maintainable. So I took a lot out of that. You want to touch on a couple things with that?
Yeah, we tried to put a lot of thought into what we did during the design and planning stage of it. We visited lots of other plants, saw what was working well for them, saw what wasn't working so well, and tried to combine all the good things we saw. And then with an eye on longevity, make sure that the components that are likely to get rusty are actually built from stainless steel, so we don't have to worry about that. Putting in elements of the treatment that don't require continual babysitting, because what I didn't want to do was have a water treatment plant and then have to put another 5 staff on just to run the new treatment plant. So make that slaking arrangement is so good. They're not having to get in and shovel any lime slurry out that they don't use. It just continually goes round a loop until it's called for. That's just some of the things we try to implement, looking at the longer term. It costs more to put in initially, but we think we'll get that payback in scads over time.
Well, I think that's part of the challenge, right, is you can never save the money you never had to spend. And so you just talk about reducing your staffing needs. You're now running 24/7 staffing operations. And that is a cost you will never show as savings, but you never have to incur as a city. And that's really that thoughtful long.
And even the simplicity of building your permeate tanks and your backwash tanks large enough that you can run over a long weekend without having to send somebody in to do pressings. I mean, that just works out brilliantly.
So just real quick, the impetus for you taking on this project to begin with, I mean, besides the question of treatment or not treatment, or softening or not softening, I'm assuming that your water treatment plant was just to the point where you needed to reinvest in this.
We had 3 treatment plants. They were getting to the point, they weren't in any risk of a catastrophic failure, but we were getting to the point where some decisions needed to be made. So again, not waiting to the last minute with this asset replacement, trying to get the city council to recognize that. And for the sum of money they were going to have to expend, they needed to be given the heads up well beforehand. So just getting all of those ducks in a row, planning it all out in a logical way, bringing them along for the journey, meant that, now's the time to do it. And now that it's done, that's in place now for the next 70, 80 years.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that, you made the decision to consolidate the 3 treatment plants into one. It was time to invest in new infrastructure. But when you did that, you didn't just replace what you had necessarily. You thought about into the future and what can we do better? How can we be more efficient? How can we implement new processes and things like that? And I think that's one. I mean, this all kind of is encompassed by like just good, well thought out asset management.
Mm-hmm.
It's a recurring
Definitely.
theme.
Yep.
And yeah, just good thinking and planning. So congratulations on that and well done.
Thanks.
How long when you look at, it's not just one building. It's raw water transmission lines and towers. What is the total construction, because of this one new water treatment plant? But you look at that total timeline from when your new tower comes online to when it originally started. Well, how many years was that?
Well, I first raised this with the City Council back in 2010. Kind of gave them the heads up that they had some big ticket items that needed to be replaced, not immediately, but they needed to be replaced. They should start thinking about that. And so from 2010 onwards, each year they'd get a reminder that this is still coming pretty soon. It appears on the 10-year CIP. It starts to get closer and closer. So we then start to implement what we need to make the right decisions, the rate study, the system modeling and all of that stuff, and then launch into the feasibility. So they knew it was coming, and they were okay with it as it got closer and closer, until we got to the point where we finally had a plan and they pushed the button and away we went.
I think that's one of the unfortunate things about public works projects, because it's such a long time horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Every council had a role in making that successful.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that will never be celebrated to the extent of the impact that'll have in the community for generations to come.
Yep.
So we're going to come back to some water stuff here in a minute. But any other sessions we want to highlight, talk about? Any other great, memorable, well-delivered sessions?
We had a legal issues, and I'm going to remember that we had a kind of a back-to-back. So we had George, which was great, but then we also had a legal issues for civil engineers. An attorney came in and spoke, and I'm going to grab his name. I'm going to phone a friend over here, and talking about just contracts and
Jeff Coleman,
thank you. And he had just what is risk? What is liability? What is liquidated damages? And just kind of giving general advice. Of course, it was always backed with talk to your city attorney. Right. But it was actually a great session. It was very relevant. And then leading back into that, right behind that, we had Chad Weinstein do our ethics. And so they played off each other a little bit with what he had to say and what he had to say. And so ethics for those of us that are registered professional engineers, we need to have one in Minnesota. Yes, in Minnesota, we need to have an ethics hours where our renewals are coming up in June for our licenses, and so we always have an ethics session. So, but I thought it paired very well. They played off each other very well. It was. I thought they were excellent sessions. But then later in the afternoon, and I'm going to look to you and to Richard. I was doing a session, so I wasn't able to go, but Jeff did a Contracts 101 that I think was very well attended, that one of my staff members went, just to kind of go deeper into contracts and what to look for and what to have in the contract. So
Yes, I was moderating a different session, but I heard good things about that. And then also George Hawkins did a breakout, and the room was spilling over, and so people were just trying to get more of that. And I think that goes to show just the strength of the speaker that we chose, and people were looking for more.
And George's breakout session was about persuasion, and one of the things that we do in making normal happen. How do we talk about the things that we do in such a way that we're not going to bore everybody with the technicals and do a lot of, the PFAS is this and the data is that and the Gantt chart looks like this. Talking about the why. We're doing this so that, 40 years from now, this plant is going to still be running and we're going to have great water. We're doing this so that, the water main, the water system, you can turn on your tap water and don't even think about it. How do you tell those stories? And the art of persuasion. We are humble as a group. I mean,
Most of
looking
us.
around-
Yeah,
not
okay,
us,
let's-
not us.
let's- let's be
Most
careful
of
here,
them.
Richard.
You're not talking for Mark over there.
Well, there's two Marks here, so let's be careful.
I don't think
They-
either one of us are real.
A lot of times, the public works staff, the engineers, are unsung heroes. I mean, we don't get capes.
Right.
So,
They would get stuck
Well,
in
we
the augers.
most of us probably have capes at home that we wear.
yeah.
But-
Shh.
We know you do, Mark.
We know you do. Anyway, but I think that's what it comes down to is that, we are very, what we do is very important and it makes a difference. It's hard to remember that we need to celebrate those things and educate the public about, it. Drink, drive, and flush people don't even think about it. So
One of the things I always like, if you'll know any conference planning people, is when non-engineers come in and speak and help provide that perspective and that context. I always find those sessions, I think, not only informative, but it's that different way of trying to carry the message and just do the job. And so I always appreciate whenever I see somebody who's like not an engineer, I try to make those sessions because it's always fascinating.
Were you saying that the engineers and the public works people are boring and not entertaining? And is
So I
that
think,
what is that what you're saying?
one of
Mark?
the
Be
challenges
careful.
is
Be
there's-
careful.
Be-
how you
yeah, I mean,
it,
this is,
but-
everybody's
there's a number of
listening.
Stereotypes out there.
There are. Some of them are true.
and so to the extent that we can break out of our shells and realize that, to your point, that we need to be better communicators, but that's not something that's in the curriculum.
Right.
We need to understand some critical thinking skills for problem solving when you're trying to say, how am I going to deal with all this water stuff, manage it in a sequential way and deliver it? And yes, it's an engineering exercise, but we're also trying to deal with future regulations, emerging contaminants of concern, all these other little things that play into that. And how do you work that complex problem to deliver?
And building on that, a lot of times if there's a water main break, or in the case that was described by George, there was a water main break that became a sanitary sewer in people's basements.
Yeah.
That was 253 properties, and St. Louis Park had
You
a
don't have
similar.
any experience
No,
with that,
not
do
at all. We had a similar situation with 55 properties with a water main break with sanitary sewer in their basements. This is the worst time for those people, those property owners. And how do we have empathy? How do we manage that and recognize the human side, but also get the wheels back on the bus? Those are all things that we do as public works professionals. So
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to customer service, sometimes it's just empathizing with somebody's plight instead of just thinking like an engineer, okay, this is how we're going to fix it. Sometimes people just want to be heard. And I'll go back to George Hawkins, our keynote. We had another speaker, Luke Fisher, for the League of Minnesota Cities here earlier this morning, and he's the director over there, and he talked about culture, different cultures in cities, and you aren't going to make big changes, but it's just the small changes. So I think George Hawkins had mentioned just coming into work early, and then instead of a suit, he started wearing the uniform that his frontline staff started wearing. Yeah, just like these two guys. So
I think we're both wearing steel-toe boots right now, as a matter of fact.
Well, mine aren't steel toes.
yeah, don't pan down at my dress shoes, please.
I got some heels on.
So yeah, I think culture, it can be your customers, but also your employees, and how do you look at ways of improving that?
Well, it's small things done often, right? That's what it is.
Small things done often become a habit and can change the culture.
Culture eats policy for lunch. I think I remember somebody
Breakfast.
saying
Breakfast?
We don't wait
Breakfast.
till lunch.
We don't
Nobody
wait
has
till
lunch. It's just
Yeah.
breakfast.
Right?
All right, great.
But that's so true, though. It sounds simple and trivial, but if you want to change an organization or communicate that you care, it is literally in those small things that the dial is moved.
Yep.
And I think that sometimes it can get lost, right? And this is actually another great thing of just a conversation when the presenters come and talk about leadership and communication and culture at conferences. I think that's a great thing to hear.
Well, and the why statement, I'm not going to plug Cynic, but we have instead of a mission statement at St. Louis Park, we have a why statement. We believe our public service makes a difference. And so you think about all the different reasons why you do what you do and why you became a civil engineer, why you're still doing what you're doing as a profession. I see it that we can change the world, and whether that's just by making sure the assets get logged right in cartographs so that future Deb knows where they are, or the future locator knows where they are. That's huge. That stuff is really huge because it can make it easier, and it's going to make it easier in the future for those future residents, for those future staff. So really, whether it's creating a safer street, creating a sidewalk, creating a bikeway, replacing water mains so that we don't have problems with backups in the basements, those are all huge things for our public, for our customers.
Well, I think it's too, I'll say for a second, I was like, I don't want my future self hating my current self for a decision I made today, right? Especially when you're in an organization for 22 plus years, there's a very good reality that Richard, wasn't like, what was I thinking?
That's a good point, because I don't know how many times I cursed my predecessors. You
and then you realized it was you, and you're like, no!
Well, I haven't come across that yet. But
20 more years, you'll be good.
The mistakes that were made 50 years ago, you uncover and go, what the hell were they thinking when they did that?
Beep. A perfect example is this lead service lines and the inventories. We were hanging our hats on being able to go back to past selves to have documented that.
Right. Seeing the as-builts and such. Yeah.
And the challenge is inherent with that. We thought for sure, we'll see it on the as-built. We'll see it in some sort of council. So far, so not so much.
So let's touch on it. So I think moving from the conference to a recap of the episodes, our first episode in season 2 was talking about the service line inventory requirement, with the intention of identifying lead service lines for ultimate replacement. Where are your guys' organizations with that? Plymouth, have you guys just made a general statement that we don't have any lead service lines, or?
Yeah, we're one of the fortunate cities where we were built rather late. So when these laws went into place, the things that were installed didn't include that. But we're still working with the Department of Health, doing different surveys and spot checks, and going through all of that analysis. So even if you don't think you have service lines, you still have to check and prove and document and go through the different submittal processes. So, but fortunately, we don't have a heavy lift like some of the other maybe first-string suburbs or the Minneapolis and St. Paul types.
I see the newsletter for Plymouth has got a little QR code that you can go in and self-diagnose. Like go in, take a picture of your service and send it off to wherever it gets sent off to.
Off into the ether.
Off into the ether.
That's why you have good GIS professionals. Good GIS professionals for that.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why I brought it up is that we started to work on this kind of game planning, and we all had some brainstorming, and we were fortunate. We actually found from 1951 on a council agenda, and one of my Mark Elgard, one of our technicians, was doing some research. On the recommendation of the water superintendent, was moved by the trustee and seconded that all future contracts shall not have lead.
Wow.
But we're working on if that really helps. That's 1951. We have pipes that were put in place in 35, but at least we could say most of the pipes in St. Louis Park were installed in the 50s and 60s. We could say that we have a start date where we could have some assurance. We are looking at doing that self-diagnosis. We're looking at how that happens. We're working with our GIS group. We've been looking back on as-built, but it's just not there. Only a couple of them say copper. Right. What's the material? Right. And we were actually laughing. We were digging through some a storage room, and we found all the Leroys and all the drafting tools. And you think about drafting a set of plans in 1935 or 1940 before CAD. I mean, every little thing had to be hand printed on those things, and maybe it was about that.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We're working on it. We're being optimistic.
So, do you have a plan? I mean, you said you're starting to talk about it.
Yeah,
but
we have a plan. We're going to be rolling out that self-reporting. We've got we've been digging. We found some trigger areas where we think that there's some start-stops. Mainly it's our public works, the utilities group, but engineering's helping out. Again, I'm the engineering director. We provide the service, we provide help. They're really operating, making it happen. So, but it's definitely something that we believe we can meet the deadlines. So, yeah, hopefully we won't have too many unknowns.
Do you have any guess as to how many, percentage of your lines might be lead?
As long as we're talking about past people, we actually have from 1992, the then Public Works Director, we have a study supposedly that was done that said we only had 4 and we replaced them. We can't find that study. We don't know what that study was about. So we've got all this history that says that we've looked at this before. And that was the other thing that we were maybe cursing the previous people. But we're working through it. Yeah.
How about Robbinsdale?
I'm feeling pretty good. In 2019, we did a meter replacement program. Part of that meter replacement program was for the contractor to take photos of what they found. And we've got all that in a database.
Awesome.
It's already been converted into GIS.
How many services do you have?
About 5,100.
Okay.
And out of that, I think we've got 1 lead service line, maybe a couple of hundred of galvanized iron, and that's it. Which is actually pretty remarkable because a lot of the services in our city date back to the 20s, mid-20s.
Right.
But we've only got record of 1 lead service so far.
Awesome.
Burnsville's, we're in pretty good shape. We've identified a number, I can't remember what the number is, but a number of properties that we're not sure of. We do further investigation, working with those homeowners to find out more. You look at data when I was in Crystal, we actually they had the original tie cards of every property, and it was labeled.
It
Oh,
was
It
labeled
was,
on the tie
it was,
card?
it was
money.
on
Are
the
you
tie
kidding?
card, and we already geotagged it
Dark.
from years ago
Yeah.
as part of this larger, effort. So there, our confidence level was, because you could literally, here's the date of install, who did it, here are the swing ties to the curb stop, and here's the material. And so that's where I think what I learned in that was you don't know what will be of value at someday in the future. And so how can we preserve information that's a report that's not lost to time, that it's somehow accessible in the future, because you never know when that'll come back. So, it's fascinating.
Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Bolton & Mink, who is producing and editing our podcasts.
At Bolton & Mink, we believe all people should live in a safe, sustainable, and beautiful community. We promise every client 2 things. We'll work hard for you, and we'll do a good job. We take a personal interest in the work being done around us. And at the end of the day, we're real people offering real solutions.
All right, moving on to the recycling episode, which was episode 2 of season 2 here. I mean, obviously, the episode focused around my experience at Roseville with Eureka, but I'm kind of curious what your guys' communities, who you're using for recycling, and, what experience you've had with that, and, have you been bitten by the swings in the commodity markets and that?
Yeah, I can jump off here. So in Plymouth, when I first started there as the Public Works Director in 2017, our contract with Republic Services was just coming up for recycling. So we have contracted recycling with Republic. And so at that time, there was a contract extension provision. So we actually negotiated and extended the contract by 6 years. So this was
That was
right.
an amazing contract, by the way. Whoever wrote that recycling contract, outstanding job.
Yeah, I
Was that a sarcastic comment? Or?
It was me. I was involved in the negotiations.
Got it.
But so that locked us in for 6 years, and that was all before the China sword and China, stopped accepting recycling, or it had to be of higher quality. So we had locked in pricing for 6 years.
6
at
years.
Great
Oops.
rates, and really great rates. And so we just now.
I say oops for Republic. But.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So of course, the contract comes up, and we have the ability to extend again. And that was just this year. Our council took action on that. But one of the caveats was Hennepin County has now required organics collection of all its cities, and without a whole lot of support, funding or grant assistance. So cities are trying.
Are you talking about an unfunded mandate?
Yeah, imagine that in government,
Yeah.
right? So cities are struggling. How do we do this? And so we looked at a couple different options to have our private trash haulers do that, working with the PCA on some different avenues. And then another option was to do organized organics. And so we negotiated with Republic to extend the recycling and then add organics in. And so we got some favorable negotiated rates, and the council decided to extend that contract for 4 years. And so starting in March 1st, if you're a Plymouth resident, we'll be offering organics collection. So if you go to our website, you can sign up, and then Republic will drop off an organics bin.
So
then
it's a separate, smaller bin.
It's a separate bin. It's a smaller bin. And so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
There's always, there's going to be hiccups, but we've been working a lot on our newsletter and pushing this out through social media on how to sign up. So, we have a good process down for overseeing our current contract through recycling. So we see that as just another piece of that contract. But of course, we spend staff time answering questions. We try to refer people to Republic via our contract terms, but organics has taken up quite a bit of staff time and fielding calls, talking with council members, just getting everyone updated. But we're excited to see how that all rolls out.
So does that mean then, because it's handled by the city, so then there's another line on everybody's utility bill to pay for the organics portion?
Correct. Yeah. So right now it says there's a recycling rate item on the utility bill. So it will now be a bigger number, but it'll say recycling and organics. Correct.
Cool. How about Robbinsdale?
I'm not much of a help here because the waste recycling and composting contracts are dealt with by the finance department.
Really?
Yeah, which is really odd.
Yeah.
I don't
Lucky
really.
you, I guess.
Hey, how do I sign up for that? Tell me the ways, Richard.
Well done.
Yeah, Burnsville. So we license haulers, and under our city code, actually under the county ordinances, if you provide trash service, you must provide recycling service as well. And so it's open hauling in the sense that residents can contract with who they want. However, all the trash haulers must provide recycling service. And then from an organic standpoint, we have a collection point in the city. Currently there are no haulers offering curbside service in Burnsville for organics.
Yeah, and Hennepin County is actually an anomaly. Ramsey County is working on it. There's a strong desire to get curbside. It's just they don't have the infrastructure. They're building the infrastructure to handle the organic collection there. And there's a couple of trial areas. I think Maplewood's one of the trial cities. And then one of the neighborhoods in St. Paul, not mine, of course. They avoid me, I guess.
Smart. I mean,
I
this is recorded.
Yeah. So it's
a trend there.
It's a growing trend to offer it, and then the interesting thing for me to watch is how many are offering it as a bin versus the blue bag option, which is pretty common in some areas. And so it'll just be interesting to see how that.
Well, I mean, since we are the nerds, latest and greatest, earlier this week, the MPCA released their final version of the 2030 solid waste plan. And if you read through that, I mean, one of the things called out is curbside organic recycling. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's this nice trickle down from the state.
If I could just jump in real quick, going back to organics. So Deb had said something. So organics and recycling, so that's separate from trash pickup. So for trash for us or refuse hauling, we license haulers, and that's an open system. So residents can contract with whoever. But getting back to the organics piece, because I know a lot of cities, when they try to organize trash hauling, there's big political push from the haulers and others. People want their open choice. We thought we were going to run into some of that just with the organized organics. We were surprised when we didn't really hit that wall. We did a survey via flash vote and then also our own internal website survey, and the majority of the respondents actually wanted the organized organics route. So we were a little surprised by that. So I think that was easier to get approved politically because we wanted to make sure we knew the temperature of the residents before bringing something to the council, because we didn't want to put them in a spot that would have been politically tenuous.
So the reason why I whispered to Michael on that was that I know Burnsville's not organized. Robbinsdale, do you organized collection?
Yep.
Okay, and trash collection. So St. Louis Park is organized, and actually we were the first community to do organics recycling
Well, just
in the state. I mean, catch up, people. No, just kidding.
Wow.
But like Richard, I know enough about this to be dangerous. We just renegotiated our everything, our organized collection, our organics, our recycling, and Republic Services does our organics. It's a company that is local, obviously, and the Buckingham Company does recycling for us. And the challenge that we had with negotiating that was a lot of the same things. Again, that shared risk or shared reward. You talked about that last time
on the revenue
side, but it's a question of commercial, finding drivers. It's what we're all seeing.
Yeah. And not only that, but equipment. I mean, you think about the lead time on a plow right now is 3+ years. I can't imagine what it is for a trash truck. And then you talk about the different styles, right? Because the way you handle an alley is different than the way you can handle just a street where you're doing curbside there. And I agree. I think is an industry that's going to be fascinating to watch, is how that plays out.
That's an interesting question. Plymouth doesn't have many alleys, right?
Yeah, we are not like St. Louis Park or others that have many alleys.
We only have 20 miles of alleys.
Okay,
so it's an interesting. We still have some.
And Crystal
did, yeah.
So is your waste picked up from the alleys?
Yeah.
See, I think that's a problem we're going to face going forward is wherever there's alleys, that's where the waste is picked up.
Yep.
But the technology is moving to the point where they don't want to do that anymore. They want to pick up out the front.
Because you need two operators. You need somebody in the back to do the rear dump.
Yeah.
Where if you don't, I 100% agree with that.
I live in St. Paul. Lots and lots of alleys. And as I said in the episode, it's like a snowflake. An alley is like a snowflake. There are no two alleys that are the same. And Eureka actually went and found some smaller vehicles that could do the side load arm.
But is it from both sides?
It's just one side. So yeah, you do have to go down the alley and then back up. Or you bring, but they have been some of the alleys they're doing. They'll go down each alley twice.
Just
to get to each side, so the driver doesn't have to get out, because that's their goal. They don't want the drivers. They want to reduce the amount of manual labor involved with it. But my home in St. Paul has 30 steps to the street from my front door. So before it was carts in my alley, when we at least 12 years, 13 years, it was like that. I was hauling the damn bins. I'll say it, the damn bins down 30 steps, and then back up the stairs.
You could have built a ramp. You do realize.
Yeah, I mean, you're an engineer. Couldn't you have figured out some sort of gravity?
Right. Like there seems a little pulley system. Yeah. Just duct tape the lid shut.
Nerd. Come on.
I would have drawn it up, but I wouldn't have built it.
Yeah, exactly.
You design things, you don't build things.
Right. So anyway, it's
it worked once.
Right.
How can I use gravity?
So yeah, it's interesting what recycling has evolved into, and how organics is going to change that. But
with organics too, I think one of the goals I think that Hennepin County had, at least with this mandate, was how do we pull out some of the things that we can use elsewhere to free up. Right now the big discussion is the Hennepin County Energy Recovery Center downtown, the burner, right? The trash to energy. And so how do we make that more efficient? And so I think the organics is one piece of many that many cities will have to take in order to change the industry, if big changes like that are going to be made. But that's going to be over a period of, decades.
Yeah.
Well, I think the big thing to think about too is how there's a tendency to oversimplify things. We can talk about organized collection, but the reality, to your point, is that trash has to go somewhere. Is it going to the HERC? Is it going to a landfill? Okay, and landfills can get full. And so what happens? In Burnsville, we have one dump, one landfill that are unlined. And so that's something we're working with the property owner and with the state on, trying to, come up with a plan to get that lined, because it's right next to a river and there are other, implications from that.
You just set that leachate.
So it's right next to the Minnesota River.
So it's a layered, complicated thing that goes everywhere. And so how do we think of it from that whole life cycle cost?
Richard will build you a water treatment plant to help you out somewhere down there.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I mean, so just for people, the HERC is the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, and it converts, it burns garbage to create energy. But there is a plan to phase that out. And that's what we're kind of just alluding to, is that doesn't mean garbage is going to stop, or trash or is going to stop being created, but where does it go?
Right.
And how far does it have to haul? And you look at greenhouse gas, and you look at
at just
climate action plan and things like that. What are we doing?
hauling distance.
Yes.
Right. If you're trucking it somewhere, how is that truck powered? Where's the staff to drive the truck? What are those cascading impacts? And so I think there tends to be to oversimplify things or hook onto the issue that's important, but it's actually a very large, complex problem that I think is going to be a challenge for a long time.
Yeah, and a great topic for a future episode. The third episode of this season, episode 3 of season 2, we talked to Russ Mathis, who was the first of hopefully at least a few of the APWA top 10 leaders from 2023 that we'll talk to. And we just talked to Russ a little bit about, why he got the award. And turns out he self-applied for the award.
Somebody's got to nominate yourself.
I don't know that that's true. I'm being on the awards committee.
Yeah. Well, that's
the awards the awards committee recommends folk to submit, and I mean, you can't get the submission in unless they do a lot of the groundwork.
Yeah.
The top 10 are always difficult to get people to agree to because there's a heck of a lot of work that goes into those submittals. Yeah. So we try and help folk get those submissions in, but we've got great people at work here in Minnesota. They deserve to be recognized at a national level. So as the awards committee, we just try and kind of gently push folk forward and help them with that. So it's not necessarily a
in Russ's case, the first 5 said no, and so he was the next guy.
I'm glad you clarified that, because during the episode, the way Russ presented it was like, well, I guess I filled out the application myself.
Well, they've got to fill out a heck of a lot of data because no one else knows what their career is like unless it's the person themselves.
Right. Essentially, the awards committee or the local chapter of the APWA nominated Russ and said, hey, fill this out because we want to nominate this award.
And just to kind of clarify, so Richard is on the Minnesota chapter's executive committee for the American Public Works Association. And I forget your title.
Oh, my title. My gosh. I'm the director for Public Works, director, city engineer.
There. And so he was just newly elected this last fall. So just to kind of acknowledge that.
After a rigorous debate.
After a very rigorous debate, which is a whole other conversation.
Did you self-nominate yourself for that?
Yes, I did.
I think the other thing, though, to what you said earlier, is just this whole, the humility side of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I don't doubt that Russ was like, well, I guess I'm myself very, trying to take a step back and the humility that comes with that. And that's part of the challenge of telling the story.
Yep.
And the things he's like, well, yeah, I did it. I'm like, and today's still Friday, right? There's no hey, this was actually cool. This was hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would look to Richard, executing this long-term plan for a water treatment plant is no small feat. No. Right? And so when his award comes up at some point in the future, hint, I just, like Richard said, we do a lot of really cool things, and we are not good about talking about some of those, especially with the time horizons that we work over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're good at talking about stuff, but so within that episode with Russ, we also talked about Russ is the APWA representative on the a new state task force.
Asset management task force.
Right. It's infrastructure resiliency or something or other. I listened to the episode.
It's a very important task force.
It is. It's very important.
The title is not the most important part of it.
But we did.
It's an acronym, I'm sure.
We talked about asset management, which was really a carryover from the episode that Russ was previously on this past summer. But within that episode, we talked about the Institute of Asset Management, which was kind of born out of Great Britain. Mm-hmm. And while we were talking about that, we talked about Australia and the requirements for asset
clarified that we weren't part of the British Empire, which I'm very thankful for.
Yes.
We are a member of the Commonwealth.
Yes. But not the British Empire.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about not the Empire or the Commonwealth so much, but what is the view of asset management in Australia, and what are the requirements as far as you know?
Well, asset management in Australia is asset rich but resource poor.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a country that roughly the size of the US, but instead of having, I don't know, 340 million, whatever the population is here, we just ticked over 27 million. So to get the necessary funds and taxes and everything that you need to maintain all of the assets in a country that large is challenging. So that led the government to look into that a little bit more, and basically AAS 27, which is an Australian accounting standard number 27, kind of came into play in the mid-90s, and that required governments to report on the condition and the state of their saving for asset replacement. So it made a lot of cities and other governments far more acute to the issue of asset management. And I think it kind of drags some of the elected members along too, because as we all know, sometimes you get in front of an elected body and ask for money to do work, and you don't need to do that, blah, blah, blah. But so here was some of the background that helped support the engineers and the public works folk to get up in front of these elected folk and say, look, we've done the numbers, and here's the story. We need to start replacing this stuff. If we don't, it's going to fail, and then it's going to cost us a whole bunch more.
Yep. Another interesting thing about Australia is you're required. It's illegal not to vote, or it's the law. You have to vote.
You do,
right?
You do. You have to vote in local elections. You have to vote in state elections, and you have to vote in federal elections.
And what happens if you don't vote?
You get fined.
How much?
Well, it's only like $50 or something, but
it's
you'll get fined. Yeah.
Even if you go up, fantastic.
Yeah, even if you go up to the polling booth on the day, get your name crossed off, go and take your paper and vote for Mickey Mouse. Doesn't matter as long as you've done your duty of going up and voting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is it like a national holiday on voting day?
No, they vote on Saturdays, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Don't do it in the middle of the week. Bloody Tuesdays. Who votes on Tuesday? That's
the United States of America.
So no, we vote on weekends, and they have pre-polls and all the rest. So if you work on a weekend, you can do your pre-poll, but that's the way it works.
What's the are there mail-in ballots or anything?
You could do that too, yeah. I've actually sent ballots from here in the US, and I always enjoy the upper house, the Senate paper. Literally would be half the size of this table.
Wow.
It's like a tablecloth. You can either vote one above the line, or you have to number every single box below the line, and normally that'll end up to about 150 boxes.
So it's like judges on the back of the ballot.
Yeah. So the items above the line are parties. So you can
you can vote for a party,
for all parties,
or you can vote for individuals.
Yeah. Interesting.
To learn more about elections here in the state of Minnesota, please visit the Secretary of State website. Don't listen to engineers around a table.
We went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, but getting back to asset management, Deb, you said you guys use Cartograph?
Yes, we use Cartograph in St. Louis Park. Actually, we started. Oh, goodness. We had something before. I've been at the City of St. Louis Park for 10 years, and when I got there, they were looking for a new asset manager because the previous company was not really... Software companies have a rainbows and unicorns sometime approach to their softwares, where they say they're going to do all this in the next version. So we did
They should say a next version instead of the next version.
I call that the unicorns and rainbows clause. We started to go with Cartograph and started building out that system. I believe it was 16. And we've got just a great group of it's called infrastructure systems managers. There are GIS professionals who take care of that. And we have 2 people down in the public works who one of them does everything above ground. The other one does everything below ground. And we have a GIS infrastructure systems in engineering that helps us with, like I said, for future Deb, and for future whoever's in the engineering department and public works, make sure that when we build something, that as-built actually is an as-built, not a should-have-built.
Right.
And gets that into the asset management, making sure that all the nodes and the dates and the materials and everything is right. we are using that information. So currently, right now, we had an unfortunate water main break in 2023 that did flood the basements of 55 homes.
The second time you mentioned that.
I know. But that really, we were able to use that as an opportunity to take a look at our whole system and really start talking about our assets. And really, we're just finishing up a report or we're finishing up a study for the entire city to really look at the condition and risk for both our sanitary sewer and water mains. And we're going to be changing how we approach our capital planning using that study. The results, we just got the final draft of the report. We started, I think it was July, and the asset management was a huge part of that. Being able to understand the history of breaks. We had a lot of history for the city back to the 90s, and that was all part of our GIS. And being able to say the age, the material, who is served, so the consequence of risk. And so we have that report, and we're going to be discussing this with our city council in the coming months to really talk about, here are our priorities based on consequence of risk. Here's our priorities based on potential for risk or for potential for failure. So I said consequence of risk, consequence of failure. I meant to say that. So really, we're leveraging that asset management. We're leveraging the cartograph, and we're going to be taking a look of not just at pavements, but start to layer in our water and the prioritization of our water and our sanitary as part of our capital plan. Up until now, we've just been planning it based on pavement condition. So really changing how we approach that.
Cool. Michael, you guys use cartograph as well?
We do. Yeah, so we started vetting, I believe it was in 2018, so about a year after I started. We had your standard GIS and whatnot.
Now, you implemented Did you implement cartograph at Maplewood?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Maplewood, and then we vetted different systems.
Do you secretly work for cartograph?
I do not. But yeah, so when we rolled it out, the focus was on capital assets, tracking the valves, the hydrants, when did we maintain it? So having that historical record, and then, street ratings, how do we track everything? But then we also tied in the workflow component. So internal, we have work service items where if we have hydrant flushing or things that we want to set up with a schedule, we can do that internally. And it's very easy to create schedules for that. But what I've always told my staff is this is a tool. If it takes more time to put it into cartograph and we're not going to get as much out of it, don't use it. Only use it when you need it and when it's efficient. And one of the biggest successes with cartograph for us is we added the C-click fix component. So it's a customer service reporting. So on our website or an app, you can go in and say, hey, the snowplow hit my mailbox. Never happens in Plymouth, but any issue, there's probably a...
It hasn't snowed. It
only happens on county roads, right?
No. This year it's not happened, this season.
Yeah, not this year, right? Richard.
This year's like 32 days old, but anyway.
Yeah. So that's been really helpful just with workflow, because then a member from the public submits an issue, it goes to the right division, it gets taken care of. A great example recently, I'm sure you all get a friendly email from a resident, why haven't you done this or that? And it's taken so long and you haven't responded. Great example, I went into cartograph, I saw this resident has called in or wanted an issue fixed 6 times in the last 3 months. We had all the records, we take notes on everything, and then I could respond directly to him. Hey, we actually had a maintenance staff person out there looking at the valve in your driveway. They told you what they were going to do in the timeline. We never had that before. Before, this person could be calling 6 different people from the city, and we're all running in circles. But now it's very streamlined and efficient. So I credit a lot of efficiency with not only tracking assets, but workflow or customer service.
And that's huge, Michael, because there's nothing worse, and I've gotten those phone calls. I've been transferred 5 times. I always encourage my staff it's important that, maybe you don't have the answer, but don't just transfer them to another person. Say, I'll call you back, or I'll have them call you back with the answers. But I think that's a strength to be able to see, who and when and why and where. And that is something that our cartograph has as well.
We had cartograph in Maple Grove when I was there. I helped implement that, and I don't work for cartograph. And we use a different system in Roseville. But I remember when we had that option, and I was really reluctant to turn that on for the resident reporting and then like seeing the status and, oh, I don't need to report this because it's already been reported. And I was really reluctant to do so because I was always worried about, well, I think you made like a little side joke comment about it's been active for 39 days or something like that. That's what I was worried about. Like if we don't get to something or if we can't fix the problem or, it's kind of like a back burner item, that it's still on this map and somebody's gonna look at it, oh my God, it's been on there for 3 weeks and they haven't fixed this. And I was just worried about like this accountability, I guess, and people like judging us for how quickly we would be able to. But, one of the sessions that you guys didn't mention from City Engineers was a smart city session.
I mentioned it, just not your part.
Yeah, exactly.
The other speaker was amazing.
Oh, those tree things was
Clearly
so
wasn't
cool.
memorable.
And Russ was amazing.
But, one of the things about, we talk about smart cities and Internet of Things and connected devices and things like that is, our residents, our constituents they use their smartphone for everything. They're ordering food from it. They're checking their litter boxes. They're interacting with all these businesses and things through their phone or through the internet. And there's an expectation that they can interact with their government in the same fashion. So I think if you don't provide something like that for your residents to report issues or to check on things, your residents are going to expect that, and you really need to start looking at that.
So fun fact, C-Click Fix, when it first came on board, I found out that there were people reporting stuff in St. Louis Park to it, but we weren't monitoring. So the residents believed, so this is just it was years ago.
The wrong city.
Right.
Or the wrong city.
Yeah, that was the one thing that annoyed me is that you could report things to cities that weren't subscribing to C-Click.
Anyway,
Fix.
But
sorry,
I believe that was a marketing
that was a
ploy, so
weird
they could
thing.
reach out and say, hey, people are reporting.
kinda
It
bad
wasn't a
about that
stupid
one.
thing. Yeah.
I think what Michael says is important, though, is from a data collection, not only is it important, Michael spent 15 minutes logging something that took me 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. But how is that data going to be used in the future?
Yes.
And is that data worth it? I don't want to minimize that, collecting it's not important, but think about that. Mm-hmm. And then, I think with residents wanting to see a response, if it's sitting open for that extended period of time, how do you manage that? And that's not to say, like, for example, we have a pedestrian crossing warning sign that was just, smoked by a car. It's been like months trying to order the replacement pole and all the control stuff for it.
Oh, it's an RFP.
Yeah, an RFD, right? So what is the expectation on staff of, okay, we have this, we've ordered the stuff, like, do we need to keep updating? Like, yep, still waiting, and how do you manage that?
I think what you need to
aspect
do
of it?
is keep some of that stuff in stock.
Well, that's funny because we've been going through them because not this winter, but it was in fall.
Maybe you should relocate that one.
So, yeah.
But it gets back to what Michael was saying is that explain the timeline. If you've got a call, that's so important for customer service. It's like, we hear you. This is what that, but hey, it's January and we can't do it until, we can't do it until May, but we'll be doing it in May as soon as we can. Yeah. Now, again, that doesn't always satisfy.
Right.
But at least communicating that, communication, it's huge. Yeah.
Richard, what do you guys use for asset management?
We don't have a formal system.
What?
No.
So what do you do?
Excel
Paper
spreadsheets?
files, I don't know
Excel
if you've heard of that.
spreadsheets, GIS layers in our system. And we do have a customer request form. It was something that Logis put together for us. And we actually have one of the elements in that is you can put things on hold for seasonal requirements and what have you. In a normal Minnesota winter, you'd never get a pole in the ground this time of year. So rather than have it hang out there for months before you can actually do work like that, that gets put on hold.
Yeah. Yep. And Richard threw out Logis, which is a complicated organization, but essentially it's an organization that was started as a joint powers of several cities to provide GIS and IS services a long time ago, and they've evolved into a much larger animal. But a lot of the Hennepin County communities use Logis for GIS services in that.
Let's be honest.
And also other applications.
And Logis, St. Louis Park is a Logis city. and just my husband is an IT professional. And to be able to, when you look at a city the size of Roseville, or you look at the city the size of Little Canada or Robbinsdale, to really be able to have the network savvy to protect your network. We also have police, and there are a lot of requirements for, to form factor extra requirements. Yep. And to have that expertise in the job market for computer professionals, IT professionals, when your city manager is only making, $175 a year, and most people can't get paid more than their city manager, and to hire that talent, to hire somebody who can do everything, it's hard. So that's where the Logises and the Metro INETs come in. Metro INET's a similar thing that City of Roseville put together 20 years ago.
Deb, I really appreciate that intro for a future conversation.
I know. Maybe I should invite Deb Heiser
staff on cybersecurity.
Yes.
And resources available to local governments.
Yeah, we're gonna set that at some point.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's a great team.
Okay.
Well, you told us unscripted.
Yep. It is. Now we are over. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, don't think just because I don't have a formal system, I don't do asset
Oh,
management.
no, Richard.
No, of course.
You obviously are successful.
Well, I mean, just talking about your water treatment plants, you clearly are doing something, and you're thinking about.
Let me cast your memory back to the 2005 National Conference here in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I presented a paper called "Making Things Happen." It was all about asset management.
There you go.
We've been doing the same since then.
Yeah, we should all have.
And I think that gets back to is asset management doesn't have to be cartograph. It doesn't have to be X, Y, or Z. It's about having a plan and implementing it and understanding what your system is. And
and scale matters.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're spending, let's just pick a number, $250,000 a year, and this is not what Crystal or Burnsville is spending on that. You only have so many resources, and you got to be intentional about where you put that into action.
I mean, if your system's 10,000 miles of water main versus 150 miles or 100 miles, whatever, it's scalable. So.
And I would say when we were in Crystal, it's the same thing. Like we had GIS to track work orders and to know where our stuff is for that collection of data, but it wasn't linked to 400 other different things. The point was our staff used it on a regular basis every day to capture the information, and that was the core need.
All right. Well, this is our first Unplugged episode. We're over an hour in material already. It goes quick when we're having fun.
I haven't sworn yet.
You did.
Wow.
You did. You did.
Bloody.
Right.
Nope.
We don't consider that a swear.
Nope. You swore. I was listening.
Is that considered a swear word?
Throw it out there. Throw it out there.
No,
Come on, drop the bomb.
No.
No, actually, he did swear several times. We just edited it out. So
It's the masterful editing.
it is. But this has been great. I'm hoping that we do this on a regular basis, and hopefully wrap in some more current events and some news, and maybe get into some controversial items, maybe some things we don't all agree on. I'll have to find something about that. And we'll see. But this has been fun. This has been great. Thank you all for. Deb doesn't think so. She thinks it's funny.
Outtakes. I'll just.
All right. But thank you all for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you again very soon on this. And for those of you, before we go, listening, if you've enjoyed this episode and the podcast in general, I say it every episode, we ask that you help us spread the word. Particularly if you're on LinkedIn, that's kind of our go-to social media site. Like it, comment on it, share it. We're also trying to get more out onto Instagram and X.
Get the bloody word out.
Get the bloody word out. I like that. That might be our new catchphrase. Get the bloody word out. All right. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Nerds out.
Nerds out.